Who's got the buttons? You do? You're not Michael. Are we open?
Well,
Like, yeah. Okay. Okay, guys. So nobody in the public gallery yet, but if they are, they'll be very welcome, and we'll remind them that mobile devices are okay as long as they're in airplane mode and that they're muted, and it's not permitted to take photographs or record the meeting at any time. Just going to ask any members, are there any declarations of interest that anybody would like to make that are different to anything that's already been published?
Chair, myself, please, of family that live along the A5 route.
Anybody else anything they would like to declare? No? Okay, are there any apologies that we're of? Seems to be a good turnout of both committees. Excellent. Okay, agenda item 2 is an oral briefing from the Ulster Farmers Union on the Western Transport Corridor Scheme, otherwise known as the A5. AERA committee members are referred to papers emailed on Friday the 8th of November. Letters from the Ulster Farmers Union dated the 6th of November 24 on the A5 Western Transport Corridor. UFU evidence to the AERA and legislation.
the title of
Legislation Committee. Okay, this paper was circulated by the AERA Committee team to the Infrastructure Committee team. There's also links to a BBC News article dated the 22nd of October 24. Farm owners and landowners fully behind the new A5. Committee for Infrastructure, Hansard, 19th of June 24, A5 Western Transport Corridor Scheme. Committee for Infrastructure, Hansard, dated the 9th of October 24, Department of Infrastructure, Trunk Road T3 Western Transport Corridor, Sign Mills, north of Ballygawley West, Order Northern Ireland 2024, and the sample vesting packs. So, a welcome from the Farmers Union. We have two at the moment. We have Chris Osborne, UFU Senior Policy. We have Alexander Kinnear, UFU Parliamentary Officer, and possibly will John be joining us?
Apology, Chair.
Okay, and we have an apology, but thank you very much for meeting us this morning. Members, some background to this meeting. The Ulster Farmers Union contacted the AERA Committee prior to the Halloween recess regarding the impacts of the A5 on 3,000 acres of prime agricultural land and 314 working farms. UFU are striving to ensure that impacted landowners are treated fairly and were approached by its members whose farms stood to be impacted by the route. Against the backdrop of existing farming challenges and the Chancellor's budget on the 30th of October, this has added additional pressures both financially and mentally on the farmers and their families. Landowners have now all received their vesting packs, and the confirmed date of vesting is the 25th of November 24. In light of these tight timeframes, the UFU have made an urgent request to present their concerns. I thank you for your attendance, and we just ask you now to brief the joint committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to both committees for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. We're going to keep this brief. 3,000 acres of prime agricultural land and 314 farms stand to be impacted by this. And I think the message that we'd like to sort of introduce to the committee today is our concern is that, and our fear is that this road will be built and then conversations in relation to the small detail will only be panned out afterwards. And by what I mean by small detail, I'm talking about basically any issues to do with putting the land right, etc., and making sure that our members are dealt with fairly. We feel that there's been a lack of transparency going forward and a lack of real detail in relation to what this would actually mean for impacted landowners. Lack of information, lack of communication, and also, like I say, we want to make sure that everybody who is impacted by this is impacted fairly. That's our introduction. Anything like that?
No, I say we're happy to take questions on a host of topics, as I say, and there's some key things we hope to draw out on those questions.
Brilliant, and I'll just be engaging members. Just I'm sure they'll pick me up on this, but I think it's. I'll bring in the Chair of Infrastructure just at this stage too, because I think I've spoken enough, and then it'll come back to me and I'll maybe ask a few questions at that stage, if that's okay.
Thank you. Well, I think it's good that we have this joint committee format today in relation to this issue, because there is quite an overlap in relation to infrastructure and agriculture. I know as a local MLA, to take my chair hat off just for 1 minute, as a local MLA, obviously been engaging with landowners and been engaging with yourselves on this issue as well. And we did have a meeting with John O'Dowd in the summertime with some of the affected landowners that are in my area in relation to this. I suppose one of the questions that I would like to ask is the fairness for farmers, for landowners. And can you give any examples of occasions where you consider that landowners haven't been treated fairly in accordance with the provision under the existing legislation?
Well, I think first and foremost, the theme of fairness runs right to the heart of this. To take a step back, I think, farming in Northern Ireland is a generational thing, and particularly, we can see in the context of the budget and the outcry that has happened because of inheritance tax and what that'll mean for family farms. Whenever we take that to an A5 scale, I think not necessarily specific examples, but the fact that these people have been farming for generations. And there's now a road project coming down the track, obviously to improve road safety, which should be first and foremost of anybody's decision. But again, have the departments and the government here recognised the real impact this is going to have on farming? Number one. Have they recognised what it's going to have on the individual businesses in the area? And I think those are questions that have yet to be answered. There's also a number of other key themes and things around ammonia and stuff which we can touch on later, and new problems that have arisen from the early days of the A5 scheme. So I think a lot of the decisions that have been taken have been based on old evidence, but we're now post the Climate Change Act. We're now post the situation regarding ammonia, and hence there needs to be a lot more answers given to those who are affected.
And just to add, in relation to your question about exact examples, we can go on, unfortunately, past experience in relation to the A8, the A26, and the A6 outside Randallstown. I was only talking to two members of ours outside in the corridor before coming in here, and they would be able to give you first-hand experience as to how they feel that they have not been treated fairly in relation to the vesting process.
And in terms of, obviously we're aware that the vesting packs have went out. It's imperative that farmers and landowners instruct an agent in relation to that process. Have you had any landowners or farmers in touch with you since the vesting pack has went out to raise any concerns, or has there been any differences that they have seen in the vesting process since it's now went out?
Yes, there have been conversations with landowners since the packs have landed, and many of them don't feel as if they are any more in the picture. I acknowledge the fact that the Department for Infrastructure have had information events, but the feeling is that they don't seem to be any more clear in terms of specific concerns. Now, make that very clear, specific concerns going forward. Unfortunately, our Deputy President can't be with us, but he is taking phone calls from people who see that the road is going to go through their farms, and they don't feel as if they've had any answers.
Is that, sorry, just as a quick follow-up before I let other people, is those concerns in relation to the compensation that they may receive further down the track, or is that specifically to do with what is contained in their vesting pack and the land?
I think they have to start with basically what's contained in the actual vesting pack itself, and the issue to do with compensation. Yes, there's conversations behind the scenes going on, that, but at the moment that's very much down the line, and that's what's probably infuriating a lot of people, is that level of detail has not been confirmed. They're being asked to basically make decisions whenever they don't know what the end game is going to be, so to speak.
Thank you so much. I've just got one question, and so far, guys, I've got Declan, John and Tom in that order for the questions. My question is in and around, I imagine that because this project has been in development for many, many years, you would hope that the department's interdepartmental relations and working would be of a high standard. What's been the experience of farmers in regard to the working between the departments, particularly infrastructure and AERA, in regards to this, and are the communication lines clear?
Well, I think at the outset, the irony of today is that the AERA and Infrastructure Committee have joined up to ask questions, but we haven't thus far seen the two departments join up to try and answer some of our questions going forward. And it's an odd way to go about the process, because we can see the urgency, we can see the lobbying efforts that's going on. we see the need to improve road safety, but one would think that they would try and take the farmers with them in this process, and that doesn't seem to have happened thus far. We had organised a meeting in Omagh for our members, which was quite a significant turnout, and the Department of Infrastructure failed to send anybody to represent, the theory behind the road and what was going to happen and the different things. So I think the communication has been extremely poor, and going forward needs to be increased significantly, because if people don't even have points of contact to go to, we are raising the wider, if you like, policy stuff, and if we can't get answers as an organisation, how on earth is individual farmers meant to get that?
Okay, and I think given the hard stop on the 25th of November, I think, in terms of FS, it's really crucial that we get some good out of this. I'm going to invite in the Deputy Chair, Declan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and you're very welcome, Alexander and Chris. Alexander, I know that, obviously taken from an AERA perspective, I know that there are issues raised at the meeting about, for example, closed TB herds and other matters. What are the main sort of agriculture-related issues that you find have been raised in relation to the proposed development?
Well, I suppose two things. The key focus on the ag side is the TB and ammonia issue. Firstly, on TB, obviously it's a devastation right across Northern Ireland, and AERA's failure and inaction to get ahead of the problem, we're all now paying a price for that right across Northern Ireland, not only in the A5 area, whether that's financially or indeed with mental health. But I suppose if a farm is going to lose a significant amount of land due to the A5 and they are already closed with TB, what are they to do? And that's the key problem. If they have a dairy herd, for example, they don't want to. The only option they have to do is to reduce stock, and the only way to do that would be to send them to a factory and different things, which is obviously what you're not going to want to do with prime agricultural stock. So that's a key concern. The other one is around badger sets and where they are placed along the A5, and should those have to be removed from a particular area that is a TB hotspot area, are those badgers then going to be moved to areas that are TB free? And whilst obviously TB is a debate in itself, the wildlife element of it is a massive part of it. So, there doesn't seem to be any consultation with the farmers in the area as to regard what is going to happen on those very practical and technical issues, that is adding concern. And as well as that, with the vesting process, if land is taken from farmers and that is then unable to be farmed after it's vested, what are these farmers to do who are locked up to try and get feed and source food for their animals going into next winter? And I suppose the other point is around ammonia. Everybody in this room should be well rehearsed on the massive implications that poor ammonia policy from AERA is having, where about 97% of Northern Ireland can't be built upon. And our key concern is, and this is why I mentioned the point at the start, ammonia, if you like, is a new issue for the A5, and to be fair, I don't think it was considered in the early days because it wasn't such a problem. But if farmers are going to lose farm buildings, such as there was a poultry farmer approached us at our meeting at the A5 who was losing a poultry house, if they can't get planning permission through no fault of their own, how are they going to farm going forward? And you note we had mentioned in our briefing paper, there's two choices for the farmers when it comes to ammonia. Is AERA going to exempt them from having to comply with ammonia planning policy? So if they lose a farm building, they can build like for like? Or is LPS going to pay these people to never farm again, which is an impossible calculation to make? So if you like, poor policy decisions and inaction to deal with those two problems has now caught up with us, and whilst they're affecting the vast majority of farmers in Northern Ireland, the A5 farmers are now going to pay an even heavier price because this is coming down the track.
Alexander, and so this is just a wee follow up there. It's a very broad question. Obviously we've got both scrutiny committees here of the department. Alexander, what would be the best message you want us to bring forward in terms of whatever influence we might have on the respective departments?
Well, I think communication is the big one. You know, if the executive has decided the road is going ahead, and we can see how that has come about. And as I say, we're not in here for a debate around that today. It's about communicating with those who are most affected. It's about looking at these new problems such as ammonia and what that's going to mean for these people, because as I said, it's a new problem. And then the fairness piece. And maybe Chris can touch on the sort of the parity of esteem we're talking about between farmers north and south of the border. And as I say, if the idea behind this road is to improve all island connectivity, well then the farmers who lose land in the Republic of Ireland, not necessarily due to this road scheme but others, then farmers in Northern Ireland should also be treated with the same care.
I think just to sort of back up what Alexander was saying, it all comes down to the issue of fairness, but also learning from past mistakes in terms of those previous road projects that I mentioned earlier. We need to learn from those to reassure landowners who are going to be impacted that they will not be unfairly treated and that they will have the best possible outcome to something that could be out of their hands.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Declan. Deputy Chair, then of interest.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Alexander and Chris, thanks so much for coming along and for the work that the UFU are doing to represent farmers and everyone affected by this. And I suppose where I'm coming from, first of all, is, Chris, you referred to it, the experiences of those impacted by the A8, and that's an area that I represent, and I'm representing some of those people. The learned experiences from them would be very useful for anyone affected by the A5 in this respect. And the first one that we come to is around the Certificate of Alternative Development Value being issued by the Department and then being penny pinched, it seems, by the LPS in terms of the valuation, offering less money at that stage. I'm wanting to know, in terms of the impact of farmers affected by the A8, how frustrating that is, and secondly to that is the different values of assessing the compensation that LPS apply. I understand there's an application either by capital value or market value, and that does then put a variation in terms of the valuation. Is that something you've seen, and how frustrating is that in terms of the different way that valuation is applied for those affected?
In relation to the first issue, I think the UFU would call upon LPS to play by the letter of the law. And that certificate is vital to achieving basically the value of the land that is deemed. And I think, like I say, we'll very strongly call for that to be applied when possible.
And just in terms of the different valuation that they placed in that, again, my understanding is that some landowners had their land valued at capital value, and then there was one based on market value, and that then creates frustration among those impacted along the way. Was there ever any indication in terms of UFU's lobbying as to why that was done? Because whenever I asked the question, it doesn't seem that there was an actual rationale to it. It's just that some were affected in different ways, and I wouldn't want to see that being played out in relation to the A5. Is that something that you've come across?
Well, I think there is a disparity here between agricultural prices and development land prices, and that's why we emphasise what's happening in the Republic of Ireland, where they tend to opt for development or as close to that as is possible, and I think that's only fair. And the other problem is, and this is maybe something I should have mentioned in Declan's an answer to his question, specifically for farmers, once this land is taken out of that area, the pressure that's going to put on existing land that's for sale within that area, so it is obviously going to rocket as farmers want to replace what's there, and also for those farmers in the area that take a lot of conacre, which is obviously rented and tenanted land, whenever that's removed from the system, those farmers aren't going to be compensated for anything at all because they don't own the land, they only take it. So that's going to put added pressure on. There seemed to be some sort of ping pong going on between the Department of Infrastructure and Finance whenever we wrote to them regarding LPS and who was in control and command and who we could speak to. Nobody seemed to want to take ownership of that answer. So again, I suppose a request out of today would be to meet with LPS and for them to publicly explain to those affected how they come to the conclusions they come to, and equally, to say, have they learnt the lessons, as Chris mentions, about the other road projects that have taken place?
And maybe just a point to finish, Chair, if I may. And this is a very stressful time for farmers and for those impacted by it. And previous experiences showed that claims for claimants' time the payment from the department and from the LPS ranged between £15 and £30 without any clear indication. Was that something you came across, and how important is it for the department and for LPS to set at a very early stage what people will be paid for the time that they have to take putting in these stressful claims?
We would obviously have very grave concerns about the impact that this would have upon the mental health of anybody involved, and I think that creating stress, it happens in every day, but particularly whenever you're dealing with basically something such as this, and it needs to be adequately and fairly compensated for. But yeah,
absolutely. Okay,
Thank you. Cathal, you did a quick one just before you go.
I might when I'm leaving the meeting, I do apologise, it's just something else, but I just wanted to ask, and thanks very much for the presentation. Just in relation to the actual definition of development land, and can you give us a wee explanatory on that? Or I'm sure maybe better even for the DFA, a raised paper, Chair, to find out exactly what's, if there's something on somewhere else, and you said you referred to the 26.
Yeah, well, our point is here that, you know, we can't currently see LPS's definition of how they come to the conclusions, and hence we're saying that we need to look at this and look at other jurisdictions as to how they come to that conclusion. So it's a sort of an open conversation where we're open to you know, bringing our own evidence to LPS, but equally them coming to us to explain how they come to their own calculations. You know, and again, we stress that point. If this is about improving all island connectivity, well then parity of esteem, you know, should be first and foremost, because it's all land at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, and Chair, I would appreciate if we ask for a raised paper on. See with it. Okay.
Thank you, Cathal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you folk for being here with us today. A big issue across through the heartland of West Tyrone, and I think from the vesting was made, some of the issues that are coming my way is with regards to the cost or the value of the land. Farmers are at a loss to get any information on the value of the land, when the payments are going to be made. Farms that are affected by Conacre, they're wondering how they're going to be compensated or sorted out. The whole issue of betterment, the replacement of their farm buildings and the rebuilding of their farmland again. And I do sympathise with you with regards to the issue of information, lack of transparency, getting that information and all of that communication with the department. I mean, I am having real difficulty with this, and yet whenever the Minister did make this announcement within the floor of the House, he did make it clear that, you know, all this issue of communication would be something that would be fairly much to the fore. That doesn't seem to be the case at the minute. So in your work with the farmers in the area and the difficulties that they're actually facing, what do you see with regards to the smaller farmer that's been affected? Do you see a number of these farms that's going to go to the wall actually and go out of business, or do you see that they'll maybe be able to hold on?
Well, I think a couple of points there. You've touched on all the key, you know, agriculture issues that we have put forward, and again, we stress on the ammonia piece, the betterment and replacement proposals that we have put forward as an organisation are logical, and the department needs to have a serious look at that going forward, because it's not only an A5 issue, but much wider than just that area. I think the viability of some of these farms, there are a number of farms that, because of the road and where it's going and what it's taking in and the layout of farms, they're probably going to have to be bought out in its entirety. There are a number of people in that circumstance, which is a pretty horrendous outcome. And again, your point, John, about the stress and mental health of farmers, never before has our industry been under so much pressure on a host of issues, whether it's climate change, or the fact that the budget that was announced last week and the two elements of the inheritance tax and our ring fence money, which have now been snapped in half. So I do think there is a concern for the viability of smaller farmers. There's no doubt about that. But again, and this is not all a question of money, because obviously people have passed these farms for generations, but if they can be compensated fairly, that takes some of the sting off. But we have to get to there, and we're not anywhere close to that yet.
I think And through the chair, I think in reply to what Tom said there, I think you've summed up everything that I think I mentioned in our introduction there, is that the feeling amongst all impacted landowners is that the road's going to be built, and then we're going to have the conversations in relation to betterment, in relation to compensation, etc. So that message needs to be addressed and answered, and the communication process needs to be improved immediately.
How do the Farmers Union find from their role in seeking to communicate with the department officials? Are you again coming up again a block wall in a sense where you're not getting what you're looking for?
Very much so. There's been sort of number of communications have gone in directly, and it has been a very frustrating process.
Thank you, Tom. And we're going to double slam you with Buchanan's now. We're going to go for Keith Buchanan.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming along. I have a couple of questions. Are you content there's enough land agents to cover these 315 farmers? Are you content that they're representing the farmers' actual cause?
Well, I think the land agency, it's a massive project, and nobody underestimates the scale of it. So as I say, I couldn't just give a definite answer as to say whether there is enough in the area or not. But again, that relationship, and we put out our own action plan for our members, what they need to do. And again, we do stress, and I know the department have also pushed this, the need to have a good relationship with land agents, and number one, secure them to start with. But again, don't have a specific answer whether there is enough.
Have you reached out to any land agents yourselves?
There were a number of land agents attended our public meeting, but we haven't, I suppose, spoke to them, one-to-one just yet. But again, some of them will be our members as well. In
an ideal world, there'd be 314 land agents. There's not. And unfortunately, we have the number, the lack of land agents to deal with the number of queries that they're going to have. But we put information out in that press release in relation to some guidance to our members about what to do whenever speaking to professionals, etc. So hopefully that answers your question on that one.
I suppose my concern is if you're going to do any construction work or any building work, you work out a value and then you instruct somebody to go ahead. The difficulty of this is, and I've experienced, and probably other people in Ulster would have the same in the A6 Castle Dawson bypass or A33 Macra 5 bypass. Road was built and the arguments were still going on. And farmers at the issue where they agreed with an individual on site that they were going to do this type of fencing or this. And a farmer's word is his word. But I've seen that to be worth nothing. And my advice to any farmer is every piece of communication is in black and white. Absolutely every, because you'll be pulling your file down in 8 years and trying to argue at your settlement. So my advice would be everything. Absolutely everything in black and white, because a farmer always works on agreement. His word is, or her word is, but that didn't stand in that case in the A32, the A6. It didn't work, and that other person had left the DFI, and then it just turned into an argument. So my concern is the representation and the amount of communication with farmers that they're properly represented by land agents. Not taken away from land agents, but they're the key. They're the key. And farmer just wants to farm. But my advice is put it all in black and white. And I suppose from your guys' point of view, whether you should have communication directly, you talked about Alexander with DFI and AERA, getting them around the table and try to have some communication, because the farmers is going to be the loser. The road will be built and these farmers will still be having arguments. Thank you.
That's absolutely, and I think we mentioned the A8 earlier on, that was 12.5 years ago, and there's still a lot of unresolved issues there in relation to key parts of the project. I think maybe sort of one of the things point I'd like to make is we as a legislation committee met at the end of September, and the A5 was discussed briefly in this context, and they took major issue with the fact that one of the quotes that came was that no landowner would be better or worse off, and I think that sort of level of language basically doesn't help. And that's one of the major issues that we want to sort of address going forward, is that type of language is not helpful.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's a good point, because there is no break even here, because it changes things irrevocably for time immemorial. There is no status quo here, so that's a ridiculous. I wasn't aware of that, the terminology. That's scandalous. Patsy, you're next, and then Nicola.
Thanks very much, Chair, and just piggyback on what Keith has said there, because he and I spent interminable hours on different roadways. We had the Castle Dawson route, the Toome bypass, and also the Marfell bypass. The key element to that is, of course, keeping lines of contact open at all occasions. I don't know how many site meetings I had. It runs probably into 20 or 30 with different parties in those instances to keep those lines of communications open. That's vitally important, and to keep a record of that, any communications that people have, I would particularly say with contractors is one thing, but specifically make sure that they're recorded with departments, in this instance the DFI. I want to explore the issue of, you said there's 3,000 acres of ground affected. Now that means presumably 3,000 acres of farmland through which the road might go through. That's not the amount of ground that's needed for the actual roadway. And I want to explore further the issue that you've raised about the rates payable for the land. Can I ask just off that, there's a very strong distinction in my mind certainly between the rates for agricultural ground and the rates for development land. Can I ask just in that regard, how much of this land through which the road is scheduled to run has existing planning permission, or has, as a consequence of a predetermination inquiry, potential planning application, or has been zoned within the local development plan? Because that's what I, in my mind, see planners will view as development ground.
Well, I think the specifics, as I say, we don't have that level of detail, to be very honest, as I say, in terms of the breakdown.
I appreciate your coming here representing the general, but it is something.
Oh, it's something to bear.
It is something that if anybody's trying to champion their case, there's a very strong distinction between development ground and agricultural ground, and that valuation, I'm sure, will be taken into consideration by LPS whenever they're looking at that.
Yeah,
and
I think
potential
the key
there is to replace, say, particular buildings that have to be done away with or replaced or whatever. That valuation, that's a separate thing. The one issue then you raised was around the ammonia. If I'm clear in what you said, this affects one person.
No, I'm just using that as an example.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said there was
yeah,
one
no,
farmer.
that was one example that we had at our meeting, that someone had approached us. So there are a number of people whose farmyards are going to be impacted.
By that, what I mean by that, I've been very specific here because this is material to what we're talking about. By being impacted, as I see being impacted by a roadway, that means either going right through it or actually having to do away with it. So I think you would need to, if you're making a case there, you need to be very specific about that, and those landowners so affected, we need to be very specific about that too.
Yep, no, not comments. I disagree. And I think just to come back to your original point about the development versus agriculture land, we're saying that this road is to benefit the society of Northern Ireland and indeed the island of Ireland. And we're saying that if agriculture land's been taken out of the system, that needs to be looked at in a sense. If agricultural land was being taken out to build a set of houses, that type of thing, and that's the argument we're saying. And we haven't come up with a firm conclusion what that should be, but we're saying we're open to the conversation with the LPS, and hence we want to get on with that.
For the purposes of what I would regard as development land, that would be the definition I would see it, and I would have to say there's a number of people that I would know in the South Derry area in particular would want that argument certainly reopened and applied retrospectively, but good luck with that one. I think the final point, and this is the overriding point in all of this, and I'm sure everyone in this room would share that view, is that this road needs to be built. And this road needs to be built. Whenever you look at the casualty list of death that there has been on this particular road, it's awful and heartbreaking. I've attended some meetings that's slightly outside my constituency, but that's heartbreaking, and I think that has to be paramount and uppermost in all our priorities.
Yeah, no, not comments to say we disagree with, and just 2 points I want to make. The ammonia thing, I say there are a number of people, as I say, not just that one example, as I say, going forward, and that's why we're saying, given the current planning problems, those people need to be sort of separated out and treated differently, and some sort of system created for them. And totally share your comments around the bereaved families. We're not here today to comment on that, but we understand the concern. And share the aspiration that road safety is paramount.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Patsy, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex and Chris, for attending this meeting this morning. And actually, I want to thank the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee as well and the clerks for facilitating this here meeting. I think it's a really good forum for you to come along and to have the opportunity to express your views on the A5, and I hope you feel like you've had a good opportunity to do that there. And it is very important that we do hear from you, so I appreciate that. As you know, I represent West Tyrone, and the A5 runs straight through my constituency. And as Patsy says, the road is very dangerous. Almost 60 lives have been lost on this road in recent years. And I travel this road daily, and I know it's not fit for purpose. When we've got agricultural traffic on the road, we've got lorries, we've got cars, and normal people trying to commute to their work. It isn't fit for purpose as it stands. And like Patsy, I've engaged with and spoken to many families who have lost loved ones on this road, and there really is a need for improvement for that road safety element. And also, as we talked about before, the regional imbalance that can be, we can challenge the regional imbalance in the area and promote economic development in the areas with the A5 as well. So absolutely that needs to be taken into consideration. But as I say, I do appreciate you coming here this morning and identifying your issues. I would like to know what engagement you've had to date with both Department of Infrastructure and AERA in regards to the process.
Thanks. We have had extensive lobby in relation to for example, our President, William Irvine, spoke with the Minister of Agriculture, particularly on the ammonia side. But also from my angle, from my end, I have written to the Minister for Infrastructure, and there was a bit of communication tennis going backwards and forwards in terms of communication, in terms of LPS and where the LPS actually lay. And there was also communication with the Finance Minister, and also communication with the Secretary of State on the back of this was actually pre-budget. It was almost sort of preempting what was coming. And finally, there's been communication with the Permanent Secretary's Office within the Department for Infrastructure, in that we've put a request in for a farm visit in the Oma area. So that's where the communication lies in terms of my end.
That's where it's at now. That's okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. John Blair, please.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to our visitors as well. One of the things I just want to clarify, so that we're focused on where the attention should be as committee or as committees plural. You mentioned at the start that there was some level of conversations taking place behind the scenes. Now, I don't wish to pry about the detail of that or anybody's financial affairs or land or property valuations, but what I'm keen to know is, I take it that those are more focused on the DFI or LPS side of things rather than the DAERA side of things. Would that be right?
Well, no, say behind the scenes, these were conversations that UFU had internally with our members on the ground in terms of
not with departments.
No, their own individual circumstance, John. So there's been no formal engagement with LPS in that regard.
No formal engagement with LPS?
Not in relation to compensation levels, no.
But there has been a DFI?
No. No, it's well, apart from the meetings that we've had on the ground where we talked about basically a fair value, so not a fair value in terms of clarification on the classification process for the land. That's happened, but there's been no specific pounds and pence conversations.
Right, but there have been sort of infrastructure related meetings with the department, the plans for the road, the dealings with the farms. There have been meetings with the DFI.
Yes, well, we met with the Minister and some of his officials once, and it's about at the end of August. It's included in our paper, as I say, but there's been nothing else around that, you know. And as I say, then whenever the road was announced, we proceeded then to have our meeting for our members in the area, which some of you all attended. But as I say, the department didn't provide anybody to come to that meeting, and as I say, we've written to the Permanent Secretary getting them out on farm. But I think, if you like, there's sort of two things here. There's the conversation with the Department of Infrastructure, which you pointed out, which needs to be a whole lot better. But also these technical agricultural issues that I spoke to Declan about. Those are AERA issues. And need an answer on. And I think a big problem with this place is the silo mentality that departments operate in. And again, I point out the irony that we're speaking to two committees today, but the two departments do not seem to be communicating with each other.
I think you've answered my question. There are further meetings planned with DFI, or at least there's a hope or intention to have those meetings.
Has to be.
Okay, I'm just going to bring in Deborah, the Chair of Infrastructure again.
Thank you. I think the problem is as well, you're dealing with individual farms and landowners, so there will be individual cases for each person, and that's why we need to stress the importance, like Keith said, that everything is documented in each individual case, and that they do have that land agent in place, which should hopefully try and ensure that we're working towards a fair settlement for each person, because I don't think anybody can do this on their own. They do need to ensure that there is those people in place to be able to support them. I just wanted to take a step back, if you don't mind, to ask in relation to LPS, and you just said during the course of the committee that you want LPS to play by the letter of the law. Do you think that LPSN in that case has not played by the letter of the law in relation to road infrastructure projects in the past, in terms of the settlement that they have provided to landowners?
I think, Deborah, the issue that I raised was in relation to the Certificate of Lawful Development specifically, and I wouldn't want to comment in relation to the wider aspect. But what I would say is, coming back to, again, harping back to previous projects, is it wasn't necessarily to do with LPS, as to do with the overall process. That there may be, for example, a construction issue that might have happened back on a road project that meant then that the project came into difficulties. And like I say, I'd just ask that they go back and look at those difficulties and make sure that they're ironed out, that they don't occur again for the people who are going to be impacted by the A5.
And then another point is just, obviously I've noted that on the 22nd of October, there was a press article which said that farmers and landowners are fully behind the new A5. That was the headline that was on that press article. Now, all of us understand it's important to have better infrastructure, it's important to have better roads, but we also recognise the need that there is for landowners to have that fair settlement for themselves as well. Agriculture is a huge part of our economy here in Northern Ireland, so we understand that as well. But what I'm keen to understand is how that decision was reached in relation to UFU, and then the outworkings of that press article in terms of, the favour, I suppose, to the road being built.
Well, I suppose as an organisation, we're represented by members right across Northern Ireland, and we have our own democratic structures, and Chris obviously takes the lead on the legislation committee. We had our public meeting, obviously, which I referenced, and people who were there, and you were there yourself. We've seen the frustration in the room, I suppose, around the process. But again, we share the thought and what has been said around, the purpose of upgrading the road is to improve safety for those that's on it. And as an organisation, we accept that safety needs to be improved. There's no doubt about that, and there's no argument around that, and we're not here today to have that. But our key message is that this is about fairness for all. It's not about lives versus livelihoods, and I think that has sort of crept into the argument slightly, which I think is unfair. We're not here to have that debate. We're here to say that we're representing our members in the area, and they, if they have concerns, well, then we have an onus to represent those concerns. And I think because of the inaction of basically two departments and poor communication channels, that's making this whole process more difficult. And hence, if we all want to get to a better place, well then it's time they pulled up their socks and got on with working with the people who is going to lose farms that, again, they've been there for generations, and that's the key thing here going forward, that this road there, it's going to impact their businesses more so than others. And as I say, if we can get to a better place, why would we not try and embrace that?
And then lastly, if you don't mind, Chair, just in relation to ammonia, I think that's a huge concern just in relation to policy there. You've rightly pointed out in terms of the planning issue for farmers, which is right. Do you think that there is much or any scope to be able to change that going forward, just to inform ourselves, obviously, from an infrastructure committee point of view?
Well, I think is the question: is there a matter of scope to do it? There's going to have to be, and that's really the thing going forward. We could sit here and talk for days around where we've landed on ammonia, but specifically for the purposes of the people with the A5, it would be completely morally unfair for those people to, through no fault of their own, lose their farmyards, whether that be if it's a dairy farm, a parlour, or whether that's like the example I gave around the poultry house. If those people lose those buildings because of the road, apply for planning permission, and as of today, most likely will not get it. So the two things, those people either need to be exempt from ammonia planning protocols, or else LPS is going to have to come up with a very large figure to pay those people who will never be fit to farm again. So again, we stress the pressure the farming community is under, not only in the A5 area, but right across Northern Ireland, due to a host of things, including the budget of a couple of weeks ago. So, we can see a major problem coming with ammonia, and to be fair to the departments, it's a newish problem, again, whenever it comes to the A5. But, and you were there that day, Deborah, whenever we mentioned it to the Department of Infrastructure officials, it seemed to them like it was a new problem. And basically they were seeing that as a DAERA problem for DAERA to sort out. So we don't accept that that's good enough. And again, stress the need that the betterment and replacement policy we have put forward is an answer to solve that specific issue when it comes to the A5.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't see any. Another one, Tom? Okay. We do have more questions.
Members that you represent along the A5 that's been affected, have you any idea how many of those will be affected that really need a betterment of their buildings, where their farm's going to be affected, their buildings are going to be affected? Do you know the number along the route that actually need the betterment with regards to their buildings and all?
No, we don't have a specific number, Tom. We don't have a good enough, if you like, analysis of our own specific members. And there will be a number of farmers who aren't our members in the areas as well. And albeit we're not here to represent them, but we're here to share their ill feeling as well. So, as I say, I think that's a piece of work needs to be done quite urgently, because it will be a small number. That's no doubt about that. But to them, they're going to feel a hell of a pain, more so than others. And I think as well, not only those going to lose farmyards, but also the where they can build in the future if they want to. If the road has sort of encompassed their farmyard, they're also going to be stuck in this. So again, the key thing is about fairness on all of those topics, but really in particular when it comes to ammonia.
Chair, I think if we had that sort of that figure, if we knew how many was going to be affected in that light, then it would maybe give a bit more pressure, if you like, to be able to lobby for them in a sense, in getting their freed up a little to get new builds on their farm, to rebuild them again.
Thank you. And Mark Durkin.
Thank you. Chairs, welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for coming along today. You're here obviously representing your members, and you're doing so well, and I can fully understand their concern and your concern. It's not your first road, see what I did there. But the process, I'll reiterate what others have said about the importance of the road, obviously the sanctity of life and the need to preserve life and prevent accidents. But this process needs to be faster, and it does need to be fairer. We've seen issues arise, and people have referred to various stretches. I'm familiar with ones along the Dungiven Drumahoe stretch, of the A6 that still haven't been settled. And word spreads across the farming community if people have felt harshly or hard done by in an experience or transaction with the department, then that'll word spreads and people will be cautious, I suppose, as they enter one or are brought into one. But it's just in terms of today's meeting and outcomes from it, Chair. So it is an extraordinary meeting. I mean, 2 committees have come together here, so it's what we do moving on. And I don't know, is it time to make a proposal, or for someone to make a proposal that we do write to the respective ministers, not just of our committees, but also finance with regard to LPS, because the role of LPS is extremely important, and so is the resourcing of LPS. We're familiar, I'm sure members of the Infrastructure Committee will be, with human resource issues within that department that have, I suppose, led to a lack of pace in the delivery of some projects. AERA is probably similarly affected, but I'm acutely aware of struggles in LPS in that regard. But we can't allow those, I suppose, areas to be ignored when there is a huge capital investment in the road that has to be shared across all the agencies involved in delivering it, including LPS, to ensure that the workings with these farmers can be done in a swift and fair manner.
Thank you, Mark. You want to respond to that? Because I've just got one further question and then we're just going to wrap up, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think maybe in reply to what Mark was saying in terms of resource within LPS, etc., and also resource generally across all the decision makers in this, is that one thing we want to avoid at all costs is any desk-based decisions, because there's so much at stake here in terms of, like we said, farmers, businesses, etc., going forward, that, you know, that needs to be a reassurance that their concerns will be taken seriously, and desk-based is not one way that'll get round that, I'm afraid. So, you know, we acknowledge that there's a resource issue, like there is with so many other industries, etc., but like I say, in this particular case, our members need reassurance.
And I think the best way to provide that reassurance is from the heads of the departments, or in this instance, ministers. I don't expect them to do or be across every jot and tittle at this point, but as we progress, I'm sure that can be delegated to other senior people within the departments.
Thank you, Mark. Just one final question, and then we'll fashion out what the joint committees are going to do in respect of today's meeting, because it is kind of unprecedented. What options are you hoping for in terms of the A5 farmers being able to rebuild animal housing without being held to the interim ammonia case by case specific advice that NIEA have given? So have you got a suite of options, of proposals, or is it just one?
Well, we understand as an organisation, we understand the issue of ammonia and the serious implications for Northern Ireland and agriculture's role in that. We're not shying away from that and what the science is saying. But specifically when it comes to the A5, we're saying that those people shouldn't be, you know, hung out to dry, you know, on account of poor policy decisions. You know, that's not on their fault. And hence, you know, we put forward a logical argument whenever it comes to betterment and replacement, not only to meet our climate goals, but also to improve animal welfare and different things as well on farms. So, you know, the A5 farmers, if you like, are going to be catapulted into the middle of this before the rest of Northern Ireland, in a sense, and it's a good test case. But it's a key issue, and again, with the caveat, you know, it's a new problem, if you like, for the Department of Infrastructure, but one which nobody should shy away from.
I think maybe following on from what Alexander said, Chair, I think there needs to be a acknowledgement by people on the ground whenever they're speaking to a landowner that if they are going to lose a shed, to say, oh, sure, you're going to be able to replace that. Like that, and you know, that again, that's not helpful. There needs to be an acknowledgement of the ammonia issue, and that needs to be factored into the conversations that people are having with landowners.
Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation, and really think it's helpful. And just in terms of, I think we need to put this on the record that this is a significant project which will save lives, and you guys today have presented on behalf of the farmers in terms of a fair settlement and nothing different than that, and haven't sought to stem it in any way. So I want to thank you for your time on this significant subject. And I'm just going to open it out now to the members just to ensure that we do have an agreed way forward in terms of the outcomes of this joint meeting, if that's okay, guys. And they should have been raised. Certainly the things that jump out to me is the frustration with the process for the farmers, frustration with the silo mentality of working between our departments, which has been evident, I suppose, particularly in regards to the ammonia strategy, which is within AERA, but infrastructure obviously are blind to that. And there's definitely a dearth with regard to the comms, but we're kind of, I think, certainly as Mark has pointed out, we'll be at least writing to the two ministers, departments in that, guys. LPS is something I think you guys are looking to, just before you go, you're looking to engage with them, but again, I think we can do that. So if anybody has any specific proposals around the detail of that.
Did Cal make a proposal before he left around getting a research paper done around the land?
It was for infrastructure, yeah.
So
You've noted that,
yeah.
Deborah?
So I think from an infrastructure point of view, I think it would be worthwhile, obviously, for ourselves just to get an understanding in terms of the developmental market price from an LPS point of view. That will probably inform, obviously, other road infrastructure projects as well, in terms of the scale as well. I suppose difficult because it is so unique and individual to particular landowners as well, but it will also help inform, particularly when you go to the other two sections that are still left to be done as well. So we, from an infrastructure point of view, can get a raised paper in relation to that. I think it's actually, Chair, very important that we're specifically looking at the ammonia in relation to the planning issue as well, because the ammonia strategy and then that planning issue in terms of landowners that are affected that may need to get planning in for buildings to scope out exactly what work has been going on between the two ministers in discussing that. I think it's a key point to raise about the exemption, whether that has been a consideration for the ministers in relation to the ammonia strategy and that planning. We can ask that question to see, but I think it's important that we do highlight that overlap in terms of ammonia and the planning.
I think, Chair, from a AERA point of view, and again, ammonia seems to be one of the biggest issues coming from a AERA perspective. Obviously, we can write to the Minister himself as to what is being considered to date, but possibly NIEA as well, as it is an ammonia issue.
Absolutely.
Right.
Is it possible we could do this joint committee again and bring both ministers to it with a range of questions at that point?
I think, I would love to do it. I'm just mindful of the dates that are, well, I suppose this will rumble on. So I think you're right. I think in terms of the timing of that, the vesting closes on 25th of November. So obviously we're not going to get it before then. But however, I think it's important we get off on the right foot, and I think that would be useful, depending on their response probably to this. I think what we would like to see is action. What I can't understand is that a project of such scale doesn't have a combined team from the two departments in particular, and possibly experts from LPS attached to it already. I find that quite revealing. But
just on that point, Chair, I think it would be really useful to get evidence and a response from LPS that they have both the logistical support in terms of people power to process these claims and how they're also going to apply fairness, given the evidence to date and the experiences of farmers in the past, that there is that assurance from them that they will be able to they'll do all they can. Because effectively it's three departments involved in this with LPS under finance, so they're a key player in this, and we don't want them to be missed out, given how important they are.
Spot on. Patty?
Chair, if I could suggest, and it's probably a joint approach here too, given that there have been issues raised around communications, it might be helpful to get the lead officials for the project to come to the committee and give us an update, basically.
You would think there would be a comm strategy somewhere, would you?
Aye.
I think, sorry if you don't mind, I think it is important to point out that they are in the planning of doing clinic sessions on the ground, and I think it's important that we do highlight that from this meeting today, that they are planning to do that, and landowners and agents will be aware of that. I think they were planning to have agents as well, clinic sessions to be able to help in terms of raising any queries that will be happening on the ground. I'm not sure of the dates of that. I think it could be contained in some of the communication that will be going out to landowners, but I think it would be wrong to say that there isn't going to be that. I think there is, but obviously in every situation communication can always be improved. But I think we do need to put that on record as well, that that will be happening.
Members are mindful also that plenary has started, and so we probably need to get back into the chamber too. So a lot of this will be agreed via correspondence anyway between ourselves. So this, when we close the meeting now, that's not this matter closed. This is the opening of the matter for us in regard to the scale of it. We have a number of proposals here, which range from letters to actually asking the two ministers to attend at a point, but I think that will happen depending on the response that we get, because we want to be helpful. We don't want to be party to either a detrimental outcome for farmers, landowners, or the road. We want to see the road built, and we want to see lives protected. So I'm just going to close the meeting officially, guys. If there's any other business before I do that, any other business, anything anybody else wants to raise? No? Okay, I'm just going to officially close the meeting, and we will be in contact, and we will be in contact with members through correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Senate Chamber. Sound